Elizabethan theaters. State standards HS1.T.C and 1.A investigate how cultural perspectives, community ideas, and personal beliefs impact a theatrical work. By the time William Shakespeare showed up, there were 11 professional theaters in Southwark. The most famous was the Globe, though it was by no means unique. Most Elizabethan theaters had a similar design and many of the same features. This is the first time in history we see structures erected specifically to house theaters, and their basic design gave us features that can still be seen in modern theaters, including the auditorium at our school. The yard was an open-air, standing-room-only space for the audience. It cost 1 penny to stand in the yard and watch a play. If you were someone who elected to pay that 1 penny to stand and watch a play, you were called a groundling. But if you preferred to sit to watch a play, especially if you wanted a little protection from the weather, for example, if it rained and you were standing in the yard, you got wet. Plays didn't get canceled because of rain. If you wanted to be covered, then it would cost you 2 pennies. And those 2 pennies would buy you a bench seat underneath a roof in an area called the galleries. If you wanted your playgoing experience to be really luxurious, you could pay a 3rd penny to rent a cushion to sit on. The stage at an Elizabethan playhouse was raked. This meant that the stage was built at an angle with the shorter end closer to the audience. It is from this convention of raking stages that we get the theatrical terms upstage and downstage. If you were an actor standing in the very center of a raked stage and you moved closer to the audience, you were literally walking down the stage, like walking down a hill. If you were standing in the center and then moved away from the audience, you were literally walking up the stage, like walking up a hill, and it is from this that we get the terms upstage, meaning away from the audience, and downstage, meaning close to the audience. The tiring house was slang for the retiring house, meaning a place where actors would go and rest between scenes, but this also served as storage for props and costumes, as well as dressing rooms for the actors to change into costume. Elizabethan theaters had the ability to do flying effects, and this machinery was stored above the stage in an area called heaven. We still use the term heaven for any kind of storage space that is above the level of the stage. For example, at our school, we have costume heaven and prop heaven, both of which are storage areas that are higher in elevation than our stage is. What we don't have at our school is a hell. A hell is a storage area below the stage. We pulled these terms from pageant wagon mystery plays and turned everything vertical instead of horizontal. So hell refers to an area below the stage that was accessible by a trap door. And you could use this area for storage as well, but you could also use it to make special effects like, for example, billowing smoke on a battlefield. If you were really fancy and you wanted everyone to see you at the theater and you can show off your finest and most fashionable clothes and display how much money and wealth you had, it was actually permissible to purchase a seat on the stage for 5 pennies. And this puts you in danger of getting run over by the actors, but it also meant that everyone who was at the theater could see you. During the Elizabethan period, women were not allowed to be performers, just like during the ancient Greek period. It was considered indecent exposure for a woman to appear in public, and we can thank the Romans for the association with female performers and prostitution. So the original Juliet in Romeo and Juliet was played by a teenage boy. In fact, all of the female roles in Shakespeare and every other play written during this time were originated by male performers. Actors made their living through sponsorships. from noble patrons. Remember, a noble is someone who has a title and has authority over a large tract of land. And it was fashionable for nobles during this time to adopt traveling groups of actors and keep them fed and clothed. In return, the actors would take on the name of the patron who supported them. The acting troupe that William Shakespeare belonged to was the Lord Chamberlain's Men, because the Lord Chamberlain was their sponsor. There was also no such thing as copyright during this time period. Once a play was written, a playwright like William Shakespeare would sell it to a group of actors. They then owned the play. The playwright couldn't do anything about it if they decided to give it to somebody else, or if somebody from a different acting troupe stole the idea and did a version of that story themselves. If you were a regular person and you wanted to go see a play, you knew whether or not a playhouse had a show ready because a flag would fly above the theater on a day that a play was going to be presented. Plays were always performed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This was a convention, a standard, because there was no real way to get the word out about different show times. So theaters just agreed plays would always start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This was also a time period before the invention of electricity, so actors relied on the sun, on daylight, so that their audiences could see what they were doing. Once everybody had paid for admission and shuffled their way into the theater, you knew when the play was about to start because someone would blow a trumpet. Just like today when we go to the movies, we know the movie is about to start when the lights in the theater get dark. Back then, they couldn't turn the sun down to let people know the play was going to start, so they blew a trumpet. It was important that actors stay in the good graces of the Queen, especially as outbreaks of plague often caused theaters to be shut down by the Master of Revels, kind of like a gaming commissioner. So it became a convention during this time period when the play ended for all of the actors to come out onto the stage and recite a poem in honor of Queen Elizabeth as a way to stay in her good graces. Today, if we get hungry during a movie, we go to a concession stand and we buy popcorn or candy. Back then, the concession stand would come to you. You would stay exactly where you were, and vendors called orange girls would walk around among the audience with trays of snacks. Sometimes these would be oranges or apples or dried fruits or nuts. It was one of the few jobs that women were able to hold without tarnishing their reputations. And they were always called orange girls, even if they didn't have any oranges to sell. If you were at an Elizabethan play, which could be very long, some of Shakespeare's plays run up to 4 hours long, and you felt the call of nature and needed to relieve yourself, the bathroom facilities were pretty gross. Gentlemen, if you needed to relieve yourself, you would go up to the edge of the stage where there were buckets tied. You would relieve yourself in the bucket in front of everyone and then return to your spot. Ladies, if you needed to relieve yourself, the place for you to do that was a corner at the back of the stage where the stage met the galleries. And you would walk over, hike up your skirts, relieve yourself from a standing position, and then return to wherever you had been watching the play. Urine was collected during this time period because human urine was often used in dyeing garments. The ammonia in urine was used to help set fabric dyes. And so garment makers, especially costume makers working in the theater, collected this urine to use in making and dyeing garments. Wouldn't you just love to wear that brightly colored costume knowing that it had been made with human urine?